that blessing, sometimes it's the setup for a scam. Today on Con Artist Code, we uncover the chilling story of a Chicago pastor who weaponized faith to steal 70% of a woman's lottery winnings. Like, comment, and subscribe so scammers never get the last word. On the south side of Chicago, where corner stores feel like home and hope runs thin but steady, 54-year-old Sister Marlene Price was ending a double shift as a CNA. She grabbed a $10 scratch off, just like she always did. But tonight, the numbers aligned. $380,000. Not billionaire money was, but enough to change everything for her son, her roof, her peace. Before she told her family, she went to the one place she always trusted, Greater New Victory Pentecostal Church, and she told the one man she believed would protect her blessing, Pastor Leon Brooks. But sudden money changes people, and sometimes it reveals who they always were. Financial insight. When you come into unexpected money, create a silent circle of zero. Tell no one until you speak to a licensed financial professional. When Marlene told Pastor Leon about her lottery blessing, she expected praise dancing. At least one shouted, "Hallelujah," and maybe even a tambourine making a surprise appearance. Instead, he froze. It wasn't the freeze of reverence. It was the freeze of a man mentally adding, subtracting, and calculating due dates. Behind the smile, his eyes flicked downward the way people look when they realize the rent is due. The car note is late, and the Lord hasn't returned their calls. Leon had been hiding financial chaos for years. The church mortgage was behind 2 months. His personal credit cards were full of emergency purchases, most of which were stress snacks and gas for driving around praying over the city. And a payday loan he swore he'd pay off in 2 weeks had now become an annual tradition. So, when Marlene mentioned her winnings, $380,000, Leon heard angels singing, but not for holy reasons. He saw freedom, breathing room, a chance to finally get the car he kept screenshotting on Instagram. That night he rehearsed what he would say. He practiced somber nods in the mirror, tried out different tones of pastoral authority, and even tested how slowly he could lower his voice to sound prophetic. He stopped on a scripture he had used many times when the offering plate looks light. To whom much is given, much is required. The next day, he invited her to his office. He dimmed the lights dramatically, entirely too dramatically, and lit a candle as if he were about to perform an exorcism on her bank account. Soft worship music played from YouTube, one of those endless loops with rain sounds and a piano that makes everything sound serious. Marlene sat nervously, clutching her purse. She wasn't used to having anything extra. She had planned to pay off her son's loans, fix her roof, maybe buy a new coat so she wouldn't have to keep sewing the old one. She wasn't prepared to navigate prophetic financial analysis. Leon leaned forward, voice whisper soft. "Marlene, the Lord spoke to me last night. He said this blessing is a test. Sudden wealth attracts sudden warfare." He paused, letting the candle flicker dramatically like a stage light. For nearly an hour, he painted a picture of spiritual danger, demonic attacks, jealous spirits, the weight of disobedience. He used every church phrase in his vocabulary: hedge of protection, kingdom assignment, financial obedience, seed sowing, stewardship examination. Marlene could barely keep up. Finally, he said the line he had practiced. "God says you must return 70% of your winnings." Marlene blinked. 70. Not 10, not 20, 70, enough to fix her roof, enough to start a college fund for her son, enough to breathe for the first time in years. She whispered, "Pastor, that's most of the money." But Leon closed his eyes like he was hearing directly from heaven. Fear is the enemy's trap. If you hold back, you block the blessing. Her intuition screamed, but her conditioning whispered louder. Obedience, loyalty, trust, and so, slowly, painfully, she nodded. Financial insight. If someone claims God requires a percentage that conveniently benefits them, it's not prophecy. It's a pitch. Divine messages don't come with withdrawal instructions. Practical tip. Any life-changing money should trigger 3 steps. Talk to a licensed financial advisor, set privacy boundaries, and create a written plan. If someone demands urgency, secrecy, or sacrifice, pause. Scams love speed, wisdom loves patience. Then he grew bolder. $5,000 here, $12,000 there. A payment toward a credit card he labeled as ministry resources. A transfer to an investment platform he didn't understand, but convinced himself was wealth building for the kingdom. Meanwhile, Marlene was at home folding laundry, feeling both relieved and uneasy. She kept replaying his words. Sudden wealth attracts sudden warfare. She wondered if maybe agreeing to the 70% had truly protected her, or if she had just given away her chance at stability. She sat with a notebook and wrote a list of goals she once believed were possible: fixing her roof, paying off her son's loans, buying a reliable car, maybe even taking a vacation. Now, with most of the money gone to kingdom work, the list felt like a stranger's wish. Financial insight: when someone pressures you to act quickly with money, especially under the guise of safety, urgency, or spiritual danger, that's manipulation, not stewardship. Real financial guidance gives you time, privacy, and options. Practical tip: any account holding significant money should be in your name alone, unless you are legally married or signing a contract with written protections. Joint accounts with authority figures, mentors, or spiritual leaders are a red flag with Wi-Fi. That night, Leon slept peacefully for the first time in months. Marlene, however, lay awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling, realizing something she didn't dare say aloud. Why does my blessing feel like a burden? After convincing Marlene that 70% of her winnings belong to God, Pastor Leon wasted no time creating the next step of his master plan: control, not spiritual control, financial control. The morning after their prophetic session, Leon called Marlene before the sun came up. His voice was gentle and urgent, the way people sound when they're about to ask you for help moving furniture. Daughter, the Lord impressed on me that we must secure the blessing quickly. The enemy moves fast. Translation. Leon wanted access to the money before Marlene had time to change her mind. He insisted they go to the bank together. For spiritual covering, he said, though it sounded more like to supervise the deposit. Marlene agreed, still shaken by all the talk of demons lurking around windfalls like raccoons around trash cans. When he arrived to pick her up, he brought the church van. The van had been baptized in motor oil and prayer many times, but today it sputtered, as if even it sensed something wasn't holy about this mission. The drive to the bank was quiet. Leon rehearsed persuasive lines in his head. Marlene rehearsed staying strong. The van rehearsed breaking down. At the bank, Leon rushed to speak before Marlene could open her mouth. We need a joint account for spiritual oversight of a kingdom assignment. The teller blinked twice, unsure if she should be calling a manager or a bishop. Marlene hesitated. Her hands trembled. Something inside her whispered, "This isn't right." But she had spent years being taught that questioning spiritual authority was equivalent to disrespecting God. She nodded. The teller opened the new account. Leon stood unnervingly close, watching every keystroke like someone monitoring a toddler around an open flame. Once the deposit was made, Leon clapped his hands softly, not in praise, but in relief. Money had a way of calming him down more effectively than prayer ever did. On the ride back, he grew chatty, suddenly cheerful, as if the Holy Spirit had descended in the Wells Fargo lobby. He talked about expanding the youth ministry, reviving the church podcast, even hinted at starting a Brooks Leadership Academy. Marlene listened, confused. She thought the money was for church repairs, not a pastor's personal LinkedIn upgrades. But Leon kept going, dreaming out loud about conferences, retreats, online mentorship programs, all funded, of course, by God's test money. When they got back to the church, he prayed with her in the van. His prayer was long, dramatic, and strangely specific. Lord, sanctify every dollar for kingdom expansion, and prepare the heart of your daughter to remain obedient as I steward this blessing. After Marlene left, Leon sat in the driver's seat, breathing deeply, staring into the distance as if receiving a vision. He pulled out his phone, opened the calculator, and entered 380,000 times 0.70. When he saw the number, he whispered in soft disbelief, "Lord, you really did make a way." But the kingdom expansion began sooner than expected. Before Marlene even reached home, Leon had already logged into the account and initiated 3 transfers. Small ones at first, test withdrawals, the same way scammers test stolen cards. For a few days, Pastor Leon tried to act normal. He preached the same, walked the same, shook hands the same, but money has a way of leaking out of people's personalities like perfume. Before long, everyone could smell the change on him. The first big purchase was the car. Leon told himself, if I'm going to be a shepherd, I need a reliable chariot. In his mind, that chariot came with leather seats, a sunroof, and Bluetooth. He walked into the dealership like a man who had just received a word from the Lord and a promo code from heaven. He pointed at an SUV he had saved in his phone gallery for months. Dark paint, chrome trim, backup camera, the whole package. The salesman's eyes lit up when Leon mentioned he'd be paying in full. On the contract, he wrote church vehicle as the purpose. In his head, he heard a faint voice ask, is this really for the church? But he turned up the volume on his rationalization playlist. When he pulled into the church lot that Sunday, people actually stopped mid conversation. The van that used to sound like it was speaking in tongues was gone. In its place, a luxury SUV gleaming under the weak Chicago sun, like it had never seen a pothole in its life. The Lord is good, Leon announced, patting the hood. A blessing for the ministry. Nobody asked which ministry needed heated seats. Inside, the changes continued. New suits, fresh shoes that never touched salt-stained sidewalks before the ninth inning of winter. A new watch that caught the light more than the cross behind the pulpit. Leon explained it away in sermons. We serve a God of excellence. Shouldn't his leaders reflect his glory? The congregation nodded, but some couldn't help noticing God's glory seemed to come in very specific designer brands. Meanwhile, Marlene stayed quiet. She had received her remaining share, her 30%, and used it with surgical precision. She paid off her son's student loans, hired a contractor to fix her roof, and bought a used but reliable car that didn't require prayer to start in winter. Her life became a little easier. Fewer collection calls, fewer nights deciding between paying a bill or filling a prescription. But every time she saw Leon float into church with another new accessory, a knot tightened in her stomach. She reminded herself of his words. This is what obedience looks like. Still, the question that kept her awake at night wouldn't go away. If this was obedience, why do I feel used? Leon, on the other hand, felt emboldened. He started talking more about vision. Vision for conferences, vision for online courses, vision for Brooks Global Ministries, complete with merch. He invested thousands into a Kingdom Wealth crypto program that promised miracle returns. The website featured gold lions, stock market arrows, and a man in a suit yelling into a microphone about harvest seasons. Leon didn't fully understand it, but it sounded anointed. In reality, it was just another unstable investment he didn't research. He comforted himself with phrases like, scared money don't make kingdom money, and God honors risk, financial insight. Any investment that relies heavily on hype, vague spiritual language, and promises of guaranteed returns is not from heaven. It's from someone's marketing funnel. Real investing involves research, risk awareness, and math, not just motivation. As weeks passed, Leon's lifestyle inflated quietly. Fancier restaurants, working retreats in the nicer part of town, subscriptions to platforms he didn't use but liked to name drop, stock apps, trading sites, mastermind networks. On Sundays, he preached harder than ever about sowing, obedience, and not questioning what God is doing in your leader's life. The topic of transparency never made the sermon outline. Marlene, watching from her usual spot 3 pews back on the left, felt her loyalty fighting with her logic. She loved her church. She respected the office of pastor. But something in her spirit whispered, this doesn't feel like stewardship. It feels like shopping. One evening, her son Devin sat at the kitchen table looking over their new budget. It was the first time in years they had more than $200 left at the end of the month. Ma, he said carefully, I'm grateful, but did you really have to give that much to the church? The question lodged itself between them like a piece of glass. Marlene stared at her hands. I did what Pastor said God required, she replied softly. Devin hesitated, then answered with the honesty of someone who hadn't learned to sugarcoat yet. Sometimes people use God to get what they want, Ma. The words stung because they felt too close to a truth she was afraid to name. That night, she pulled out her bank paperwork and looked at the joint account she had opened. She realized she had never once checked the transaction history. Practical tip: windfalls don't just require a plan, they require monitoring. Set up transaction alerts, check your accounts weekly, and never rely on someone else to watch it for you, no matter their title. Trust is not a security feature. While Marlene was printing statements at home, a different kind of conversation was happening at church. In the fellowship hall, over cheap coffee and dry cookies, members had started a new tradition, quietly comparing what they noticed about Pastor Leon's sudden upgrades. New car again? Didn't he just get that suit? I thought we were still behind on the building fund. The questions stacked slowly, like chairs after service. One person listened more carefully than most: Aaliyah, the young trustee who actually read the financial reports instead of just nodding through them. She didn't know where the money was coming from yet, but she intended to find out. By the time Pastor Leon rolled into the church parking lot for the third Sunday in a row with yet another new outfit and a swagger that suggested divine direct deposit, the congregation had entered what sociologists call the observation stage. Translation: they were watching him like a reality show. Church folks notice everything: new shoes, new haircuts, new attitudes, new cars, especially new cars. And Pastor Leon's SUV still had that just driven out the commercial shine. Even the sanctuary lights seemed to reflect off it more dramatically than necessary. The murmurs started small. Two deacons talking quietly near the sound booth. A group of ushers exchanging glances every time Leon mentioned kingdom favor. Mothers of the church leaning in, whispering behind fans they used like shields. But the real conversations happened in the fellowship hall after service, the unofficial courtroom of every church in America. Over styrofoam cups of lukewarm coffee and cookies that tasted like someone forgot both sugar and joy, people began piecing together the pattern. Didn't he say the building fund was empty? How he get a new car when we canceled the youth retreat? Y'all notice he got a new watch too? And a new belt. And a new attitude. Meanwhile, Marlene sat quietly at a table near the corner, stirring her coffee without drinking it. She heard the whispers. Every word felt like a pebble thrown into her chest. She wanted to defend him. She wanted to believe she was part of a righteous mission. But discomfort had now taken up residence inside her, refusing to move out. Aaliyah, the young trustee, approached her gently. Sister Marlene, can I ask you something? Marlene smiled politely, though her stomach tightened. Of course, baby. Aaliyah sat down. Have you noticed Pastor's been making unusual purchases? The question barely landed before Marlene felt her throat close. She forced a small nod. Aaliyah lowered her voice. I've been reviewing the accounts for next quarter's financial report. There are new withdrawals tied to the church's EIN big ones I didn't authorize, and ones that don't match any approved expenses. Marlene's eyes widened. Her pulse thumped beneath her skin. She didn't want to believe what she already felt bubbling inside her. What kind of withdrawals? Aaliyah took out her phone, tapping the screen to reveal a spreadsheet. Columns of dates, amounts, descriptions, payments to dealerships, large transfers labeled MISC and Ministry Expansion. A crypto transaction she didn't even know how to categorize. Marlene's heart dropped. She recognized the dates. They matched the days she had deposited her lottery winnings. Her blessing was written in the numbers. So was the betrayal. Before she could process the shock, Leon entered the fellowship hall. His presence shifted the energy like a strong wind blowing through a room. Conversations quieted, eyes watched. He strutted over to greet people, his tone overly warm, the way people sound when they know eyes are on them. When he spotted Marlene and Aaliyah at the same table, something flickered behind his smile. He walked over slowly, each step rehearsed. My beautiful ladies of God, what are we discussing over here? Aaliyah closed her phone instinctively. Marlene forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Leon lingered a moment too long, scanning their expressions. Then, as if marking his territory, he placed one hand on Marlene's shoulder, gently but firmly. Sister Marlene and I have been walking through a season of obedience, he announced loudly, ensuring nearby ears could catch it. Some blessings are heavier to carry than others. Marlene swallowed hard. She wasn't sure if he meant the blessing or the burden, or if he even knew the difference anymore. Once he walked away, Aaliyah exhaled. Something's off, she said, and I don't think we've seen the worst yet. Marlene nodded slowly. Her intuition, the one she had silenced in the name of obedience, was now speaking clearly. This wasn't God's test. This was Leon's trap. That night, she opened her laptop and logged into the joint account for the first time since the deposit. When the page loaded, she gasped. The balance was nearly empty. Financial insight. Transparency is not optional in financial relationships. Anyone who discourages you from checking statements, asking questions, or requesting documentation is protecting themselves, not you. Practical tip: set up automatic alerts on every account. Even small transactions should trigger notifications. Fraud doesn't start with big withdrawals. It starts with what people think you won't notice. With trembling hands, Marlene printed every statement. The numbers didn't lie, but neither did the feeling in her chest. It was time to confront the truth and the pastor who had twisted it. For 2 nights, Marlene barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, the account balance flashed behind her eyelids like a warning light on a dashboard she could no longer ignore. She tried to pray. The words felt heavy, tangled, unsure. The kind of prayers you whisper when you're scared the truth will answer back. By the third morning, she made a decision. She was going to confront Pastor Leon face to face, with every printed bank statement in her purse. She arrived at the church early before anyone else. The sanctuary lights were dim, the air still chilly from the overnight drop in temperature. Her footsteps echoed through the hallway as she approached Leon's office. His door was cracked open. She could hear him humming, a cheerful off-key tune that grated against the tension in her chest. She knocked gently. "Come in," he called, sounding far too upbeat for someone who had committed highway robbery with Bible verses. She stepped inside. Leon glanced up from his desk, wearing a smile that looked rehearsed. "Sister Marlene," a pleasant surprise. The smile faltered when he saw the stack of papers in her hands. "Everything all right?" he asked, the cheer slipping out of his voice like air from a balloon. Marlene sat across from him. For a moment, she stared at the desk, at the candle, at the open Bible, at the framed Pastor of the Year certificate he printed himself. Then she spoke. "I checked the account, Pastor." Silence. Thick, heavy, like someone had dropped a choir robe over the room. Leon cleared his throat. "Ah, yes, the joint account. A wise step of obedience." "It's almost empty," she continued, her voice trembling but steady. "Most of the money is gone, and the withdrawals, they weren't for the church." Leon leaned back slowly, steepling his fingers like a man preparing to deliver a TED talk on gaslighting. "Marlene, blessings often require sacrifice that don't make sense to others." She exhaled sharply. "Pastor, you told me 70% was God's requirement. But this," she lifted the papers, "this is not ministry. This is spending on you." Leon's eyes narrowed just slightly. Not enough for her to call him out, just enough for her to feel the shift. "You're being spiritually attacked," he said. "Ah, yes. The oldest scammer defense in the pastoral playbook." Marlene didn't flinch. "I'm not confused. I'm not under attack. I'm asking you plainly. Why did you take my money?" The room felt smaller. Leon tapped his pen on the desk, each click a nervous tell. He leaned forward, lowering his voice into that same whisper he used when manipulating. "God trusted me to steward it." "Stewardship doesn't come with a car note," she replied. It was the first hint of assertiveness he had ever heard from her. Leon's smile vanished. "Marlene, be careful. Doubt leads to destruction. You don't want to curse your blessing by questioning your leader." She stared at him in disbelief. He wasn't scared. He wasn't remorseful. He genuinely believed he could spiritual talk his way out of grand larceny. "Pastor," she said softly, "the money is gone.
I trusted you, and you used my faith against me.
That struck him. Only for a moment, but it struck him. His jaw tightened. His eyes darted toward the door, as if calculating whether this conversation could be salvaged or silenced. He leaned across the desk, voice low and tense. Whatever you're feeling, take it to God, not to other people, not to the board. The enemy would love to tear down this ministry. Ah, there it was. Not just manipulation, containment, a soft threat wrapped in scripture. Marlene rose slowly, clutching her purse. I don't need to go to the board, she said. The truth is already in the statements, and if the truth tears down this ministry, maybe it needed tearing. She walked out before he could answer. Her heart pounded like a drum line. She had never spoken back to a pastor in her life, but for the first time, she felt her dignity clicking back into place. Behind her, Leon slumped in his chair, staring at the door she had closed, not in remorse, in panic, because men who love power more than truth always fear the moment someone finally chooses themselves. Financial insight. Confrontation is data. A trustworthy person responds with transparency, accountability, and solutions. A manipulator responds with guilt, fear, or spiritual threats. Their reaction reveals what they were hiding. Practical tip. Never be afraid to ask someone about where your money went, especially someone in authority. Respect does not require silence, and faith does not require financial blindness. When Marlene stepped outside, the cold air hit her face like a truth she could no longer ignore. She knew what she had to do next, and it wouldn't be handled in prayer, and it would be handled legally. By the time Marlene left Pastor Leon's office, she had crossed an invisible threshold, the kind you don't come back from. Her hands were shaking, but her mind felt sharper than it had in weeks. She drove straight to her niece Jasmine's apartment. Jasmine, first-year law student, collector of highlighters, breaker of generational curses, opened the door holding a bowl of cereal and a half-finished assignment on agency law. Auntie, you okay? Marlene didn't speak. She simply placed the stack of printed statements on the dining table. Jasmine's eyebrows rose the higher the pile got. Oh, she whispered, we're doing paperwork today. They sat together as Jasmine flipped through the statements, her eyes narrowing with each line item. Luxury Auto World, Kingdom Crypto International, Retreat Space LLC. Auntie, this man spent your money like it came with a shopping itinerary. Marlene winced. He said it was for ministry. Jasmine looked up slowly. Ministry? Unless God is running a car dealership, these are all personal expenses? She pushed the papers back toward Marlene. Auntie, this is fraud. Marlene swallowed hard. Fraud. A word she'd always associated with strangers, not pastors, not people who prayed over her family and baptized her son. Jasmine pulled out her laptop, typing quickly. We're reporting this, and not just to the board. They're too close to him. We need the state. And the IRS. Marlene gasped. The IRS? Jasmine nodded, eyes still scanning. Churches don't pay taxes, but they absolutely get investigated for misuse of nonprofit funds. And this, she waved a statement like a flag. This is misuse with a capital M. Later that week, the trustee board met for their quarterly review. Leon entered confidently, wearing a new suit the color of I pray you don't notice this is expensive. But the room's energy was off. Aaliyah sat with her laptop open. Two senior deacons stared at him with tight lips. Even the usually bubbly church secretary looked like she was about to conduct an audit on his soul. Pastor, Aaliyah began gently, there are some discrepancies we need to discuss. Leon smiled too wide. Discrepancies are tests of faith. Nobody smiled back. Aaliyah clicked to the next slide. A spreadsheet of withdrawals, dates, amounts, descriptions. Leon's smile shriveled. These don't match any board-approved purchases, she continued, and some appear to be personal. Leon cleared his throat. All expenses advance kingdom work. He said it like a slogan he hoped would end the conversation. Another trustee chimed in. Pastor, did the kingdom need a luxury vehicle, a crypto investment, a leadership resort retreat in Lake Geneva? Leon blinked. Every leader needs time to refresh. It went downhill fast. The board asked questions. Leon deflected. They pressed harder. He invoked scripture. They asked for receipts. He invoked spiritual warfare. They asked for transparency. He accused them of lacking faith. It was the least productive meeting in church history. After an hour of circular explanations and biblical gymnastics, the head trustee sighed. Pastor, until we sort this out, we're freezing all church accounts. Leon stopped breathing. That evening, he tried to log into the joint account he shared with Marlene. Account access restricted. The message glowed like divine judgment on a computer screen. Meanwhile, Jasmine and Marlene met with a state investigator. The woman sat with a calm smile that suggested she had seen every version of this scam. She flipped through the statements with the speed of someone who didn't need to be convinced. Yep, the investigator said. Misappropriation of funds, fraud, potential coercion, and, oh yes, this is definitely going to interest the IRS. Marlene nearly fell out of the chair. He told me it was for God, she whispered. The investigator nodded with compassion. Scammers often use the language you trust most. For some people, it's business. For some, it's romance. For others, it's faith. Financial insight. Any authority figure, spiritual or otherwise, who discourages oversight, accountability, or documentation is waving a giant red flag. Healthy leadership invites questions. Manipulation avoids them. Practical tip. When emotions are high, write down the facts. Facts stay steady when guilt, fear, or spiritual manipulation try to cloud your judgment. 2 weeks later, the church received an official notice. The IRS would be conducting a review of all financial activity for the last 2 years. The sanctuary went silent. You could hear the choir robes trembling. Leon tried unsuccessfully to spin it during Sunday service. The enemy is attacking this ministry. But the congregation wasn't buying it. Most of them had seen enough crime shows to know. When the IRS comes to church, it isn't because the devil made you do it. As he preached, Marlene watched from her pew. The charisma was still there, the theatrics, the cadence, but something fundamental had cracked. She saw not a leader, but a man unraveling. And by the time the investigator returned with a second round of questions, she knew. Leon's fall wasn't coming. It had already begun. Investigations move slowly until they don't. For weeks, Pastor Leon tried to keep the church running like nothing was wrong. He preached, he smiled, he deflected. But paperwork speaks louder than sermons. The IRS review uncovered exactly what Jasmine and the investigator suspected. Church accounts, blended with personal spending, undocumented ministry expenses, and a convenient pattern of withdrawals that matched Leon's upgrades. The state investigation added another layer: testimony, board members, staff, and finally, Marlene herself. Sitting in a small, plain interview room, she told her story about the counseling session, the candle, the talk of demons circling her blessing, the 70% demand, the joint account, and the empty statements. Her voice shook at first, but steadied as she spoke. Shame slowly loosened its grip. Because in that room, she began to realize being deceived was not the same as being foolish. The investigator listened, taking notes. When Marlene finished, the woman nodded. What happened to you is called financial exploitation. He abused his position of trust. This isn't on you. Those words landed softer than any sermon Marlene had ever heard, not because they were poetic, because they were freeing. Eventually, the case moved from investigation to charges: fraud, misuse of nonprofit funds, coercive financial conduct, the kind of charges that make headlines even in cities already tired of scandal. The church found out through a local news broadcast. There was Leon's picture right between a traffic update and the weather. The headline might as well have read, "Faith leader forgets God, is also watching the bank accounts." On the Sunday after the story broke, the sanctuary was quieter than usual. People sat with their programs folded, not quite sure whether to pray, cry, or leave. The pulpit was empty. Leon was out for personal reasons, the board announced. Everyone knew what that meant. In the weeks that followed, things changed. The joint account was officially closed. Legal restitution was negotiated. Marlene received a portion of her stolen money back. Not all of it, but enough to feel like the universe hadn't completely ignored her pain. She used some of that restitution to do what she planned from the beginning: build stability, an emergency fund, a savings account with her name only, a meeting with a real financial advisor, the kind with licenses, not a pulpit. The church too began its own healing. The trustee board rewrote financial policies. No more single person access to major accounts. No more verbal approvals for large expenses. No more mixing "God told me" with "I want this." Aaliyah led a congregational meeting explaining the new systems: monthly reports, open books, accountability structures. Some people were uncomfortable at first. Transparency always feels loud when you've been trained to whisper. Still, they stayed. Not because of Leon, because of each other. Because faith, at its best, isn't about one person at the pulpit. It's about the community in the pews. As for Leon, his story took a different turn. Facing charges and mounting evidence, he eventually accepted a plea deal: probation, restitution, a ban on managing nonprofit finances for a long time. He moved quietly, far from the stage lights he once loved. Maybe one day he'd understand the harm he caused. Maybe not. Either way, the money had finally stopped moving in his direction. On a quiet evening months later, Marlene sat at her kitchen table. No stacks of overdue bills, no joint accounts, just her notebook, a cup of tea, and a simple budget that actually made sense. Devin sat across from her, scrolling through something on his phone. "Ma," he said, "you know, you could have let this crush you. You didn't." She smiled softly. "I almost did," he nodded. "But now you know better. And a lot of people will learn from what happened to you." She looked at the printed statements she had kept, not as reminders of shame, but as evidence of survival. "Next time I get a blessing," she said quietly, "I'm taking it to a bank, not a back office with a candle." Final financial insight: money doesn't make someone a scammer. It reveals who they already were. Protect your resources with logic, not just loyalty. Ask questions, demand receipts. Remember that no is also a holy word when someone tries to twist your faith into their income. Final practical tip: when you receive unexpected money, a bonus, inheritance, settlement, or win, give yourself 3 protections: time, privacy, and professional advice. Anyone pushing you to move fast, stay quiet, and just trust them is not covering you. They're positioning you. This wasn't just a story about a pastor and a lottery ticket. It was a story about how easily fear, reverence, and trust can be weaponized, and how powerful it is when someone finally decides, "You can't use my faith against me anymore." If this episode opened your eyes, don't keep it to yourself. Like, comment, and subscribe to Con Artist Code. Share this with someone who loves God, but also loves their bank balance. Because out here, discernment is free. Getting scammed is not.